The best comebacks in UFC history. We've all seen a fighter get dominated from the get-go inside the UFC's octagon. But sometimes a fighter who's seconds away from defeat turns it around and earns a surprise victory. Join us in this video as we explore 10 of the greatest comebacks in MMA history. Number 10. Frankie Edgar vs. Gray Maynard. Back at UFC 125, Frankie Edgar was set to defend his lightweight title against a respectable and dangerous competitor, Gray Maynard. As the fight began, Maynard brought forth an aggressive onslaught and landed a big left hand that clearly rocked the champ. He chased Edgar and dominated him for most of the round, knocking him down on several occasions and nearly finished the champ. Joe Rogan would go on to claim that Edgar suffered the biggest beatdown he'd ever seen a fighter take and recover from. Ultimately, Edgar managed to make a miraculous comeback during the next few rounds, leading the judges to call the fight draw. This allowed Edgar to retain his belt by the skin of his teeth. Number 9. KAMARU Usman vs. Leon Edwards. KAMARU Usman is considered one of the UFC's greatest ever welterweight champions. He ran through the division on several occasions, amassing an incredible record of 15 wins and 0 losses. This led Usman to a highly anticipated rematch with Leon Edwards that went down at UFC 278. As the fight began, fans were quickly shocked as Edwards managed to take Usman down and control him on the ground. But as the fight went on, it became apparent that despite all the improvements Edwards had made over the years, he seemed to lack the heart to win. Rocky went into the 5th round having lost 2, 3, and 4 and was heading for certain defeat. Only a miracle could earn him the title. But then, out of nowhere with under a minute left on the clock, Edwards faked a jab and followed it up with a vicious head kick that sent Usman to the shadow realm. This highlight reel finish is considered one of the greatest comebacks and knockouts in the history of the UFC. Number 8. Anderson Silva vs. Chael Sonnen. Anderson Silva is remembered as one of the most dominant middleweight champions in the history of the UFC. Since joining the UFC in 2006, the Spider went on an 11-fight winning streak, with 6 of those being title defenses. The next contender he would face would be none other than the world's greatest trash talker, Chael Sonnen. The pair met inside the octagon at UFC 117 in 2010, and from the get-go, Sonnen started backing up all of his trash talk. He knocked Silva down in the first round and punished the champion for a further 3. While Silva got some shots off in the early parts of each round, Sonnen continuously took him down and dominated from above for most of the fight. All the challenger had to do in the 5th round was wait out the clock, and we would see a new champion at the end of a reign. Unfortunately, a lapse of judgment 2 minutes before the final bell led to Sonnen getting caught in a triangle armbar combination, and Silva forced him to tap. This was a truly unexpected and shocking conclusion to this classic fight. Number 7. MIESHA Tate vs. Holly Holm. In early 2016, Holly Holm was out to prove her recent win over Ronda Rousey had nothing to do with luck. But at UFC 196, she would have to face another formidable opponent in MIESHA Tate. The first 2 rounds of the fight were somewhat evenly matched. Holm was more aggressive in the striking department, but Tate's wrestling and submission attempts kept her in the fight. By the end of round 3, Tate was eating a lot of stiff jabs and leg kicks. As the fight entered into the championship rounds, Holm began to stalk Tate, landing kick after kick and stuffing her takedown attempts. Just before the end of round 4, Tate ate a huge right hook and head kick that left her partially dazed and in retreat. As the pair entered into the 5th, it was clear the champion was on her way to defending her belt. But even after eating some more heavy strikes, luck was on Tate's side. As Holm decided to get back to her feet after a takedown, Tate jumped on her back and locked in a tight rear naked choke that put Holm to sleep, resulting in the best comeback we've ever seen in the women's bantamweight division. Number 6. Brock Lesnar vs. Shane Carwin. At UFC 116, fans were set to witness one of the biggest heavyweight fights in the history of the sport. Brock Lesnar hadn't fought in over a year, and fans were curious as to whether or not he could withstand the power in the hands of Shane Carwin. When the pair met in the middle of the octagon, Carwin shocked fans by unleashing a severe beating on Lesnar for most of the first round. He had Lesnar on the defense, covering up, and sent him to the ground with a vicious uppercut. CARWIN continued the onslaught, and the referee seemed seconds away from stopping the fight on several occasions, but somehow LESNAR survived until the bell. As the second round began, CARWIN had all but punched himself out. This allowed LESNAR to go on the offense, and he quickly scored a takedown. He went on to smoothly transition into a tight arm triangle, ultimately forcing CARWIN to tap. Fans couldn't believe the comeback they had witnessed, and nor could CARWIN, who was but seconds from unifying his heavyweight title. Number 5. Tim Sylvia vs. Antonio Rodriguez Nogueira. In 2008, heavyweight champion Randy Couture was locked in a legal battle with the UFC. This led to Tim Sylvia and Antonio Nogueira meeting at UFC 81 for yet another interim title. The towering Sylvia did his best to keep the fight on its feet and punished Nogueira in the first round, eventually dropping him to the canvas. Sylvia continued his onslaught in the second round, outstriking Nogueira in every encounter. As they entered the third, it looked like Sylvia would get an early finish and an interim title to accompany it. But out of nowhere, the Brazilian managed to pull guard after eating another heavy shot. From here, Nogueira worked in a vicious guillotine that quickly took the air from Sylvia, and he was forced to tap a minute and a half into the third round. Number 4. SHONIE Carter vs. Matt Serra. Long before Matt Serra shocked the world by defeating Georges St-Pierre, he had to earn his stripes by climbing the ranks of the lightweight division. Serra made his UFC debut way back at UFC 31 and was matched up against the crafty SHONIE Carter. Serra looked great in the early rounds of the fight and seemed to be heading toward a decision victory. But with just 10 seconds to go, Carter launched a Hail Mary head kick and followed it up with a spinning elbow that sent Serra crumbling to the canvas and out cold. This secured a highlight reel finish for Carter and the 19th win of the veteran's career. Number 3. Scott Smith vs. Pete Sell. The Ultimate Fighter 4's finale was one of the most entertaining in the history of the show. Scott Smith and Pete Sell slugged it out for 2 rounds, and fans were unsure how this one would finish. After a few minutes into the third round, Sell managed to land a devastating hook to his opponent's body that forced him to retreat back towards the cage. Visibly in pain, Sell rushed at Smith looking for the finish, but he was met with a vicious right hand that knocked him out cold. Following the stoppage, fans couldn't believe what they'd witnessed, for everyone in the arena thought Smith was done for. The end of this fight is still considered by some the 10 best seconds in the history of The Ultimate Fighter. Number 2. ANDREI ARLOVSKI vs. Tim Sylvia. In 2005, ANDREI ARLOVSKI and Tim Sylvia were by far the 2 most dominant competitors in the heavyweight division. Arlovsky had run through most of the division like a freight train, and when the rematch against Sylvia went down, it looked to be a repeat of their first bout. Arlovsky dropped the challenge early in round 1 and looked close to a finish. However, Big Tim mustered up the strength to recover and soon landed a short uppercut that connected beautifully with the chin of Arlovsky. This dropped the champ to the floor, and Sylvia followed it up with a vicious array of ground and pound strikes to regain the UFC's heavyweight title spectacularly. Number 1. Matt Hughes vs. Frank Trigg. Back at UFC 52, Matt Hughes and Frank Trigg met for a rematch that was a few years in the making. The fight was hectic from the get-go, and just a few minutes into the first round, Trigg hit Hughes with an illegal low blow which the ref did not spot. This allowed him to go on the offense, taking Hughes back and locking in a rear naked choke. It looked to be all but over for the champion when somehow he managed to free himself from the tight grasp of Trigg and lifted him into the air before slamming him on the opposite side of the octagon. Following this, Hughes let loose on his downed opponent with various strikes before transitioning into a rear naked choke, forcing Trigg to tap. To this day, it's considered the greatest comeback in UFC history. If you enjoyed this video on the best comebacks in UFC history, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos like this on a weekly basis. Thanks for watching, and see you all next time.